Good morning and welcome back to another weekend workshop. It sure is awesome to have you with us today. Happy summer. The last that we spoke, it was probably the spring. So it's great to have you back for our summer workshop series now. For those I haven't met before, I think I've met most on the call, but my name is Carrie Ramsey and I'm the project manager for the Weekend Project, which is led by Queen's University. And we have been serving and supporting women entrepreneurs now for about 4.5 years through a project which began with FedDev funding and now is funded fully by Queen's University. So thrilling to have Shula back today. She is going to be delivering to us a great topic, a topic that actually came up from members of our community. A few members of our community who felt, you know what, I know people who are struggling in their business. They can't quite get past this this ominous cloud, I'll call it, of COVID that sort of, rocked all of our worlds. But as we'll hear today, not just COVID, but other stressors and anxiety inducing situations and circumstances that just, sometimes can kick us off course as business owners. And so I know that, whether people are joining us on the call in that situation, or very likely we know people who are, and we're here because we want to help them out. Then welcome to everyone who's joining us. At this point, I usually do a land acknowledgement, but Shula is going to do that as a part of her presentation. So I want to just hand the virtual microphone over to you, Shula. So great to have you back. You have spoken to our community before, are certainly a friend of the Weekend Project. So welcome. It is wonderful to have you with us here today.
Thanks so much. And it's fun to be virtually back in Kingston. I was there from 10 to 20, from 10 years old to 20 years old. And I loved Kingston. I love the Queens community. So, and the Weekend community even more so. In fact, it's going to be one of the strategies that I mentioned in the presentation. So thank you for asking me. And I think it's very perceptive of the folks who are thinking, that you approached me saying that this was coming from the community, because I think it's very perceptive of the community to be touching into what's happening with them right now and what can be done about it. What's going to happen today, there'll be a land acknowledgement. I'll say a little bit about who the heck am I and where do I get the chops to talk about this, what we're facing and what we can do about it. And then there'll be time to ask and answer questions or have discussion at the end. So first of all, I would like to say that this land acknowledgement is part of my response to the calls to action from Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I invite you to treat every land acknowledgement you hear as a call to action to you for reconciliation. One of the things that you can do is go to either whos.land or native-land.ca. I put the links in the chat there. And in the chat, you can find out where you are and put your name, your pronouns, and your business in the chat so we can all know who each other is and where we all are. And that's one action that you can take today. And then if you didn't already know this, whose land you're on, I encourage you to share that and to talk about what you've learned about that with your friends and colleagues, because that can be an action for reconciliation for you. I'm an uninvited settler on unceded land that has been stewarded and inhabited for 10,000 years by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Kayenta peoples. And this land, I live rurally on 13 acres out just halfway between Smith Falls and Merrickville. And I don't know how folks who do work supporting clients manage without land to support them. Certainly as somebody who works directly with the mental health of entrepreneurs, this land supports my mental health and my work as well. And so I'm grateful to the ancestors and those who now care for this land and its waters. Another action that you can take today, if it's within your means to do so, is to make reparations. And I will put links in the chat for that because the harms of the settler colonial project are ongoing to this day. And, it's not all within all of our means to make reparations, but I just share it there in case. So I'm Shulamit Ber Levtov, and I welcome you to call me Shula for short. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the entrepreneur's therapist. When I left school, when I left my training for therapy, I jumped right into business training and coaching because I knew that most small businesses fail within the first year, and you're lucky even to make it to the first 5. And as a woman in her 50s who was entering the job market in a new career, I knew my employment prospects weren't good. And so I wanted to create sustainability for myself, a business that would support me until I didn't need it anymore. And that's why I started with business training and coaching. And in the course of that learning, I was hanging out with entrepreneurs. I was the only therapist in the group. And I was also networking with entrepreneurs. And as a therapist in that place, in those environments, I had a real privileged position because people shared with me their emotional experiences of running a business, how demanding and stressful it is to run a business. And I also, as I grew my own business, felt these demands and stresses myself. And at a certain point, it was like my mental health mind and my business mind had a baby, because it occurred to me, hey, wait a minute, there needs to be mental health professionals who understand the unique mental health challenges for entrepreneurs and who can help people address them. And that's how the Entrepreneur's Therapist was born. And I see some folks introducing themselves in a chat. I invite you again to put your name, your pronouns, whose land you're on, and a little bit about your business and your links as well, because those of us here on the call might want to be able to connect with one another. And if you put your LinkedIn and your Instagram links in the chat, that's a way that we can do that. So the topic of this talk is getting over the pandemic, and moving forward. And many of us are stuck doing that. And where I would like to start is to consider, I invite you to consider that really there's nothing wrong with you. That what you're experiencing now is a normal response. That is to say, the response that would be expected to what we would call abnormal or exceptional conditions. So anyone going through what you're going through would be feeling the way you're feeling. So there's nothing wrong with you. And if there's one thing you take from the talk today, I hope that this is it, that there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. And I'm going to lay out why that is true. But even if you don't remember the details, I hope that you're able to take in that there really is nothing wrong with you. So what are we dealing with? Current economic conditions, current world conditions, and I would say so-called post-COVID, because it's just more complicated. So current economic conditions, you all know this, but I have to mention them because it's important. Empty shelves, increasing food and gas prices are freaking people out. In addition, the current world conditions are having an effect on people's mental and emotional well-being. It's extraordinarily stressful to be exposed to world events in the way that we are these days. So with respect to the current economic conditions, there's some data around this. The Canadian Institute for Health Information revealed some data showing that they did a study in 2023, and at that time, 29% of Canadians age 18 and older said that they had experienced depression, anxiety, or another mental health condition. And this is up from 20% in 2016. So we're almost 10% more. And I'm sharing these statistics so that you know you're not alone. Economic stressors in this study by the Canadian Institute for Health Information, economic stressors were identified as a contributing factor to declining mental health. And a larger number of Canadians reported worry or stress related to paying for housing, having enough food, and having shelter compared with their peers in other high-income countries. So Canadians are more anxious than folks in other countries. So-called post-COVID, actually COVID is ongoing. There's a surge occurring right now in Canada and the US. And people are feeling burnt out. People are fearful of taking any kind of risk. There's the mental health impacts from the initial onset of the pandemic times. One study in Cyprus that was published just in February of this year demonstrated the long-lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on mental health. 32% of the participants in that study experienced moderate to severe anxiety symptoms. So that's a significant amount. in general, just for comparison, in Canada, 18% of the general population will meet the criteria for a mental health diagnosis in any given year. But as a result of the pandemic, Canadians in Canada, 60% of adults reported that their mental health was worse because of it, because of the pandemic. So you might be feeling this. You might know people who are feeling this. And the question is, what is it that we're actually dealing with? Well, because of all of this that I've just described, we are struggling to think creatively. We're struggling to rethink what we're doing in our businesses. We're struggling to give ourselves permission to look at things in a fresh new way, to serve clients or customers in the same way, to maybe rethink who are our clients and customers and approaching them differently, because we're depleted. We're still facing uncertainty and other threats. All this stress and unpredictability in the economy, in our personal lives, in our mental health, in our businesses feels unmanageable. And so we are mentally and emotionally overwhelmed. So if this resonates, if this sounds familiar, if you know what this is like, or you know somebody who knows what this is like, I invite you to give a thumbs up in the chat or just type me. One of the really important things around coping is knowing that we are together, that we share these experiences. So in the course of this past month, I've talked to my CFO, my business strategist, and my clients, all of whom have talked about all these things. So I see there are folks in the chat. I know Carrie has an exposure to a great number of entrepreneurs and business owners, and she's mentioned how many people, she knows many people in business are dealing with this too. So it's not just you, right? It's not unique to any one individual. This is the water we're swimming in. We're overwhelmed mentally and emotionally. So what happens when we are overwhelmed? Our nervous system has a range of responses to stress and trauma. This is a human thing. And these responses show up in our bodies and our behaviors in specific ways. So before I go into the details of how these things show up, it's important to remember that the vast majority of the time, these responses are outside of our conscious control. This is our safety impulses coming forward to ensure our safety no matter what. So we will often engage in what seems like irrational behavior, or we might be making choices that were like, after the fact, why did I do that? Like, what is the matter with me? But without focused and consistent work with the support of a professional, it's very difficult to exercise influence over our initial nervous system response. And the second thing to remember about these is that these responses, as I mentioned, were intended to help us survive. So the only standard, instead of blaming and shaming ourselves for the things that we did to survive, the only standard by which we can measure these behaviors is, did we survive? Not if the behavior made sense, not if the behavior made problems down the line, not if other people criticize what we did. The only standard by which we can measure these behaviors is if we survived, because that's what they're about. So I say all this because often when I lay this out, people shame and blame themselves for having these kinds of responses. And it's just really our basic survival instincts that lead to these things, these responses. So the first one, and I welcome you to take screen captures. Oh, you're welcome, Carrie. It is really key, right? I invite you to take a screen capture, but also I'll be sending a PDF of the slides to Carrie to send out to you afterwards. So the fight response, which is very familiar, right? Flight. It's like the threat is a bear, or the stressors are bears, and you're a bunny, and you have to get the heck away from the bear, right? It's a reaction to let me make sure that I'm oriented correctly. Flight, I'm talking about, is running away, a release of stress hormones that signal us to flee from this danger or threat, right? So instead of staying right there where the bear is going to eat you, this response will literally or metaphorically cause us to run. So for example, in business, if you're in a meeting, a tense meeting with a client, an example of running could be just abruptly standing up and leaving the client meeting. And it sounds ridiculous, but it happens. Some people will just stand up, say, I'm done here, and leave. On the right-hand side, on the upper right, we have fight. This involves a release of hormones in the body, primarily cortisol and adrenaline. And this triggers the reaction to stay and ward off or fight the apparent threat. So fighting, all of these responses can have adaptive and maladaptive manifestations. So an adaptive behavior in business, when you're feeling the fight response, let's say a client is belittling you or patronizing you, you communicate clearly and implement boundaries, right? That's a protective response, but it's adaptive. A maladaptive fight response might be verbally attacking or physically hitting that person. So in most cases in business, what it might end up is a yelling match, for example. I've heard lots of stories about folks having yelling matches with clients, for example, either out loud or in the comments. And this is normal, right? This is your body's way of trying to protect itself. So we have flight and fight. Then we have freeze on the lower left. The freeze response leaves us temporarily paralyzed by fear and unable to move. So in this response, rather than fighting off the danger or running away, we do nothing. And this is, you'll see where an animal will freeze very still in the hopes, like the bunny freezes, hoping that it just blends in because it's got camouflage. And if it stays very still, the bear won't see it. In a business context, a freeze response could be drawing a blank and being unable to respond. And I've certainly had this experience. And the fawning response on the lower right is a kind of going along or a kind of not rocking the boat. So most often fawning in business, we'll see it as kind of a people pleasing. In business, it could show up smiling politely, even when they're saying something that is internally upsetting. For example, they might be unsatisfied with an already clearly stated scope of work. So you might, in the fawn response, agree to do more work than was agreed upon for the established fee. People pleasing like this at the expense of your own well-being is one type of fawn response. And I want to mention specifically because people get trashed a lot for people pleasing, oh, I shouldn't do that. We look down at people pleaser or people pleasing behaviors. But the thing is, it's a way of avoiding conflict, and it's a kind of emotional survival by using compliance and helpfulness. And when you think about in business, appeasing and people pleasing with clients is directly related to survival, because if you antagonize a client, you might lose them, and then you lose revenue in your business. And then the emotional logic, which is not the logical logic, right? The emotional logic is that if you don't please and appease your clients, then your business will fail because you'll have no clients. Logically, we know that's not true, but on an emotional level, it feels, we have fear around it. It's a survival fear. So if you've had any of these kinds of experiences, recognize any of these kinds of behaviors in yourself or in your friends, it's a total business survival instinct. Yes, Jennifer. So if you recognize this, I invite you to give a thumbs up or a me in the chat or in the reaction. Or if you know others who struggle with these kinds of responses when confronted with stressors in their business, you can say, yes, I've seen this. And again, the reason I'm inviting you to validate or say me too, or say I know what this is again so that we know that there's nothing wrong with us. These are our natural human survival responses, and we have very little control over them. So I'm going to invite you now to take a pause, because there's been a lot of information. Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? Teresa's mentioning about how she's used all at one point or another. Like, we can cycle through the range of responses too, depending on the circumstances. And there are ways that we can adapt them too, when we can think creatively. Okay, well, I have the impulse to fight. How can I use this in an adaptive way, in a way that supports me and my clients and my business? But because we're talking about stress and nervous system responses, I'm going to invite you to take a little somatic break. And you may or may not want to follow along with me, and that's just fine. But what I'm going to do is push back just a little bit, come forward a little bit on my chair, and put my feet flat on the floor. I'm going to place my palm on my chest, my hand on my chest, palm down. I'm going to take a breath, and you might like to join me. And then I'm going to lift my arms and breathe in. You can join me or not. And as I exhale, bringing my arms down, I'm going to move around a little bit just to remind myself, because the kind of pose that we can get in when we're concentrating intently can be a very freeze type response in the body. And moving ourselves reminds our nervous system, oh yeah, I'm not in a freeze. There's no bear. I'm okay. And this is one of the kinds of things that you can use for yourself in the moment if you like to. So the window of tolerance, or the window of resilience, is another way of talking about this. When stress is high or a threat is present, we can end up outside of our window of resilience, and we find ourselves engaging in nervous system reactions instead of holistic responses. So I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but if you see the dotted lines, in between the dotted lines, we have emotion ups and downs, we have stressors. And of course, in the course of everyday life and business, we're going to have times when we're anxious and times when we're having a low mood, and we cycle up and down more or less in the middle of the window of tolerance. But when stress is high or a threat is present, then we can end up in fight or flight, which is hyper arousal. It's a tense and anxious. Or we can end up in the freeze or flee, which is hypo arousal. And you can take a screen capture of this if you like, or you can wait to get the the slide presentation from Carrie so that you can refer back to this. So the name of the game is, there are two aspects to working with this information. One is to recognize when we're outside our window of tolerance or our window of resilience, so that we can intervene, and bringing our general baseline down so that when we go up, we don't go up and shoot out of the window of tolerance in either side. We go up and down within the window. So I want to clarify, what I'm talking about here is what's known as emotional regulation. And I want to make it clear that emotional regulation doesn't mean not having emotions. What it means is, yes, you have your emotions, but your emotions don't run the show. Your emotions don't take you out of your window of tolerance. Emotional regulation means that you have emotions and you have ways of caring for them. And so when you're outside your window of resilience or your window of tolerance, the body's agenda is survival. And it uses one of the types of behaviors that we've already talked about. So when it's in hypo or hyper arousal, when it's above or below its window of tolerance, it'll use one of these types of behaviors. So again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Your body is doing its very best, your body and your nervous system, to help you survive the threat, to help you cope with the stressful situation. So this is just a different representation, right? This one here, if I can get the slide to go back, this is a vertical representation of the window, and this is a horizontal representation. And what we're looking for is to be able to support ourselves in staying in the middle here, where we can function with effectiveness and make wise, as it says here, money decisions, but also business decisions. So what can we do about all this? we know we're overwhelmed. We know what the body or stressed out. We know what the body and the nervous system does to protect us when we're overwhelmed and stressed out. But like, so what? So the purpose then is that with this information, you can notice when and how your nervous system responses come up when you use fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And I encourage you to take some time to work with the previous graphic that shows those 4 responses and how they show up, and maybe do some reflection and journaling, or maybe discuss it with a friend, a business friend whom you trust, so that you can become familiar with what is your go-to response, how the other ones show up, what are the behaviors that let you know that this is what's happening, so that you can support yourself in de-escalating your nervous system activation and in regulating your emotions, that is to say, caring for them so that they don't get so big that they overwhelm you. And I'm going to tell you how to use these tools. But first of all, let me tell you what they are. You can use active self-listening skills, otherwise known as active validation. And you can create a supportive environment for yourself. So I'm going to tell you how to do that in a moment. But it's important because we're in community here. And it's important because there's a lot of assumption that what's wrong with us is wrong with us and us alone, and that we have to deal with it alone. But humans, our human brains are relational. We are meant to be in relationship with one another. We actually depend on one another emotionally for safety, cues of safety and support. And so the tools that I'm going to talk about how you can use them for yourself, but these are ones that you can use in community. So we need the combination of individual self-support and communal support for ourselves and others. So we can use the active listening skills I'm going to tell you about for one another as well. We can offer that to a colleague, and we can ask the colleague to do that for us. We can validate one another. We co-regulate, right? Simply the act of telling your story and having somebody else go, me too, right, is enormous validation. And as an example of that, there's a woman in Portage la Prairie, Manitoba. She's an entrepreneur, and she established the Entrepreneurs Mental Health Association. And it's a nonprofit, and its mandate is to develop support and resources for entrepreneurs and their mental health, because this woman realized that as self-employed folks, of course, we all know we have limited access to insurance and other supports, sick days, all those kinds of things. And her vision is to build an association, a nonprofit that supports entrepreneurs in accessing support for our mental and emotional well-being, because we experience so many barriers, right? But what gave rise to the establishment of the Entrepreneurs Mental Health Association was her experience in business, where something had happened in her business that affected her so deeply. And this is a story she's shared publicly, so I'm not telling secrets. And you can find her story on her Instagram account, the Entrepreneurs Mental Health Association on Instagram. Something happened in her business that was so distressing to her that she ultimately started thinking about taking her own life. And in time, she eventually developed the courage to share these thoughts, share that she was having these thoughts with another entrepreneur. And I wonder if you can imagine what it was that other entrepreneur said. Yeah. That other business owner said, me too. That other business owner had thoughts of taking their own life. And then Kennedy is her name. Kennedy got the courage to share with one other person that she was having thoughts of taking her own life because of her stress in her business. And the other entrepreneur said what? Yeah. That other entrepreneur said, me too. And this is how, as a result of sharing this, and Kennedy understood that she was not alone, that she decided she was going to establish the Entrepreneurs Mental Health Association. And this is the kind of communal response to a mutual shared human problem in entrepreneurship that is one of the aspects of caring for our mental and emotional well-being and addressing the feelings of overwhelm and depression and despair that we might have in our business. And this is where community is so important. And communities, it's so vital. Yes, Carrie. And WeCan is an example of that, right? Like WeCan has hosted now 2 webinars on mental health and issues related to mental health and business. So this community is ripe for these kinds of discussions and for entrepreneurs in the community to approach one another and discuss this stuff, because it's Carrie has set the tone for this community by inviting these conversations. And I think that's really important and an example of communal leadership around mental health and emotional support for entrepreneurs. So that said, what are the tools? So active self-listening, in other words, validation. This is a tool you can use to support de-escalation of your nervous system and regulation of your emotions. So de-escalation, so you can come back into your window of resilience, and regulation so that you can stay within your window of resilience. So the first step in active self-listening is to acknowledge what's happening. Like, oh, wait a second, I'm out of my window of tolerance. Oh, wait a second, I'm freaking out. Oh, wait a second, something's happening here. I don't know what it is, but something's happening. The difference is what we tend to do is say, what's the matter with me? Suck it up, buttercup. How come you can't handle this? You should know better than this. All that kind of self-talk. And I'm inviting you, when you notice something's happening, to simply say, oh, wait a sec, something's happening. Wait a sec, I'm distressed. Wait a sec, I'm frustrated. It is abundant, Jennifer, and it's so painful and difficult and such a barrier to mental and emotional well-being. I have to say, especially for entrepreneurs, because we set the bar so high for ourselves. Oh, and this reminds me, actually, I'm going to take a little detour, because I did see that there's the question of being, is it possible to be both overwhelmed and depressed? Yes, overwhelming, actually, that experience of overwhelm, if you imagine it like a heavy, heavy weight, can bring you to the collapse state. And in fact, overwhelm often brings you to the flight or collapse / fawn state, that you might find yourself having no energy and not knowing what to do. So yes, it is possible to be both. Because I would say overwhelmed can lead to activation, because you can see like the experience of being overwhelmed and get frustrated and angry, or you can feel overwhelmed and collapse. So everybody has their own unique way that these things show up. There's no prescription one way or the other. We're humans and we all respond in a human way. So thank you, Jennifer, for bringing that up, because it's important to make the nuance. So acknowledge, right, that if possible, as you become more and more familiar with what your responses are, you can go, oh, something's happening here. And then once you've acknowledged that something's happening here, you can validate. So instead of saying the kinds of things we usually say to ourselves, you can remember maybe what we've talked about in this presentation, that there's actually nothing wrong with you. And you could say something to yourself like, of course you would feel this way after all you've been through. Or of course you would be this way, you would be feeling this way, because look what you're going through right now. And you might also say to yourself, I've got you. You're not alone with this. And it's an interesting aspect of regulation, emotional regulation and care, that we need to hear this from folks on the outside. This is why when we share with one another and somebody says, me too, we know we're not alone. Well, our insides, our emotions, it helps us to be in community with ourselves and to say, I got you. I got you. You're not alone. And our usual habit is to say, don't worry, it's okay. But that's an invalidating response. Our nervous system is trying to help us survive. And so to say, well, stop helping me to survive, it's going to be like, but no, you're in danger. You need to survive. And it's going to keep doing what it's doing. But when you can say to yourself, and you can see I'm making this gesture of placing my palms down over my heart space, both hands, because this is my comforting gesture, my self comforting and validating gesture. It helps me sense physically for my insides that they're not alone. And this is the difference. This is the validating way. The flip side of don't worry is I got you. You're not alone. So that would be the second step. First step is, oh, something's happening here. I'm upset somehow. Something's going on. And the second step is, right, of course, I would feel this way. Look what's happening around me. Maybe taking a breath. And I got you. I got you. I'm with you. Yeah. And then the third step is to take action. And there are two aspects of the action step. The question is, are there concerns that I can do something about? So again, coming back to survival, if there are challenging situations with clients and you're at a loss as to how to deal with them, you might consult with somebody. Maybe there's somebody in the WeCan community who does HR. Maybe there's someone in the WeCan community who is an expert in communication. And you can say, listen, I'm having trouble figuring out how to have constructive conversations with difficult clients. And they can coach you in how, and you can do some practice and some role play so that when clients, and we all have that difficult client, when that difficult client starts doing what they do, you're like, right, I know what to do here, and can pull on that resource, right? Because the worry is, oh my God, this is a difficult client. I can't say anything to them because if I lose my clients, my business will fail, right? And that's a survival thing. So I have to shut up and just please be people pleaser. Or you can say, okay, I'm scared about this. I don't want my business to fail. I do want to keep clients, but I don't want to use an unconstructive survival impulse. So what action can I take here about this? Oh, I can consult with somebody to get some support around this. But sometimes, like cash flow, for example, where cash flow is an issue for many, many, many businesses. It's actually the number one, according to the research that I've looked at around entrepreneurship and mental health, cash flow is actually the number one mental health issue in business for business owners. And it's a very concrete issue. It's a very like nuts and bolts survival issue. But you might be up at 2 a.m. worrying about your cash flow. And you can go through this process. Yes, I'm worried. I'm worried. Of course, I would be worried. Cash flow is low right now. I got you. Let's take a look. It's 2 a.m. What action is necessary now? Well, what action right now is at 2 a.m., the most important thing is supporting myself, not tactics around my cash flow. At 2 a.m., we might think there's things we can do, but in the majority at 2 a.m., there's not much we can do about our cash flow. What we need to do is support ourselves. And so we can then go to the supportive things, the repertoire of supportive behaviors and tools. So for me, the 2 a.m. thing is I have a guided meditation that I may or may not be able to get back to sleep because of the anxiousness in my nervous system, but I can put on a guided meditation that helps me regulate my nervous system. I'm in my bed. My body is physically safe. I'm not in harm's way in this moment. There's not a bear in this room. I'm safe and okay. And then when I've had some relaxation time, let's say I'm able to fall back to sleep and I wake up in the morning, I can take a walk, have a breakfast, sit down. And because I'm back within my window of resilience, I can think creatively about what it is, what are the concrete actions I'm going to take right now. And it might be that I just continue to execute on my strategies because persistence and consistency are the two really important things when it comes to strategy. Stick with your strategy, and assuming you've developed a strategy for the current conditions, stick to the strategy and persist. It might be that you look at the current conditions and say, the strategy I have is outdated. I need to get support to develop a new strategy, right? So when you're within your window of resilience, you can think creatively about what is the best action for me to take right this minute. So that's the action step. So 3 steps to active self-listening: acknowledging, oh, something's happening here; validating, of course my nervous system is going to have, going to be shaky a little bit. I've got you. And what's the most appropriate action here? So I'm going to pause again for a moment. I'm going to take a drink. I'm going to invite you to have whatever kind of self-supportive and self-regulating activity, like maybe breathing or stretching. I'll probably do that too. So active self-listening skills, and you can do this for your friends, you can do it for yourself, right? Your friends and colleagues, and you can do it for yourself. And creating a supportive environment. These are the principles for creating a supportive environment, and I'm going to read them to you. And I invite you maybe to kind of sit back. If it feels right, you might like to close your eyes, or maybe just cast your gaze into the distance while you listen to me read these to you. It's okay to go slowly. It's okay not to know. It's okay to take a break and come back. It's okay to get support. It's okay to make mistakes. And it's okay to ask for what you need. These are some of the assumptions. Hang on. These are some of the assumptions or principles that underlie what a supportive environment is. But these are also, as I just did for you now, affirmations you can use in the validation phase of active self-listening. And these are also attitudes you can remind yourself of when you're facing difficulty. It takes time and care to repeatedly validate yourself so that the nervous system can relax. So saying these things to yourself once might feel good in the moment, but it's with repeated reassurance that they will begin to sink in and take an effect. And so what you might like to do is use the active self-listening. Like if you remember, coming back here to the window of regulation, if you notice that you're at, like, say 4 or 5, that you can begin right in here to use the active self-listen, the active self-listening to help you stay inside this window. And you can repeat these affirmations to yourself when you're doing that. You might like to print them out and put them on the wall. And you can use them over and over and over again. And when you're telling yourself these things, these support you in thinking creatively. So if you think back to the very beginning when I said, what are we dealing with and what is the impact? Well, the impact is that all our resources are directed towards survival, and none of our resources are serving us in terms of our CEO self, our executive functions, the capacities that we have as entrepreneurs. But without the energy directed in that direction, those skills aren't available to us. But when we set up this kind of supportive environment, it takes us out of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and directs the resources toward thinking creatively to address the stressors, the challenges, the threats that are present in our environment. So I'll repeat, what you're experiencing now is a normal response to abnormal conditions. And I invite you to take that in. There's just nothing wrong with you. So I'm curious, and if you could, by a show of hands or thumbs up in the chat, I'm curious, how many folks here have received something useful from this talk today? And I'll pause for just a moment. You can thumbs up in the chat or thumbs up in the reactions. Yeah. Oh, Cindy, thank you for the question. I'll come to that in the Q&A in just a moment. My mission is to change the entrepreneurial ecosystem to include the whole human founder as a business priority. And this is the example of the kind of work that I'm doing. And if you'd like to participate and support my mission, I invite you to express your gratitude by going to this link that I'm going to put in the chat, or you can use the QR code and entering the, oh, it didn't post as a link. Isn't that funny? I wonder why. Let's see if I can get it to post as a link. Yes, there it is. Okay. Go to that link and enter the code WC June, weekend June, and you'll get a free digital stress relief kit after you've given me some feedback. So I'll give you 2 minutes for that. I'm going to pause my audio, and you can take the time to offer the feedback, get your free bonus, and then we'll come back for Q&A and I'll respond to Cindy's question then. So thank you all so much for taking the time to do that. I look forward to taking in your feedback. Oh, bye, Teresa. I'm sorry you have to go too. It's too bad because the Q&A is the richest part, but there's a recording, so you'll be able to catch up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so Cindy asked, and I invite you to, oh, Carrie, did you have something you wanted to say?
I was just gonna, we'll cover this maybe question. I was thinking we should end the recording in case anybody wants to ask questions and does not want to.
That are personal. Yeah. So since Cindy asked it in the chat in a public way, I'll address the question. And then would it be good to end the recording at that point? Perfect. Yep. Okay. So Cindy wants to know if you've been speaking kindly to yourself for a length of time and still find yourself in survival mode. The first thing I would say is that there's nothing wrong with you. Like, yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's distressing. Yes, it's discouraging. And there's really nothing wrong with you. Things economically have been escalating over the past 6 months. And to be alone with these stressors and to have to carry these things, it makes sense that if the threats are still coming in, your body's still going to be responding to these threats. I would also say that so first of all, nothing wrong with you, right? Like, this is your organism trying to do its very best to survive. And if you want to care for yourself, because this is distressing and upsetting and frustrating and discouraging, and you want to get some support around this, you could use some of the things that I like, the active self-listening, but maybe engage a colleague or a friend, talk to them about what active self-listening is, and invite them to do that so that you can do it for one another. so that you can express, this is what I'm scared about. And they can say back to you in some way or another, of course you'd be feeling this way. It makes complete sense that you would be feeling this way. There's nothing wrong with you. So there are ways that you can work with friends. There are ways that you can work in community. You can bring up the fears that you have in supportive groups, like maybe if you're in a mastermind or something and there's a check-in phase that you can just bring, because part of the hard thing about this is the sense of being alone, and you don't have to reveal all of the details, but you could say something like, things have been so hard and so stressful in the world and in the economy in the past 6 months, which is true for everybody, and it's affecting me. And I wonder, is anybody else having the same experience, right? And then people might say, me too, and you would have that. But ultimately, when we want to make change, we work with someone to support that change in a structured way. So just like we have a coach for our business, where our businesses get farther faster when we have business coaches, because we can set goals and have clear strategies and engage in consistent action laid out for us. When we're having stuff happening on the inside and we want to care for that in a way that creates a shift and a way for us to move forward, working with someone who can support you in being strategic and consistent around caring for these things is what's going to lead to the shift. It also has to do with what I said before, which is co-regulation. We're relational human beings, and so saying these things to ourselves alone sometimes isn't enough, because we are meant to be with other people. So if you're trying it on your own and aren't having success, again, there's nothing wrong with you. It's because we're meant to be in relationship, and it's extraordinarily hard to be alone in the dark and afraid. When you're alone and in the dark and you feel like you don't have the tools and the threats just keep on coming, it's practically impossible to get out of survival mode, right? It just makes sense that that's how you would be feeling. So that's my answer. And perhaps now you can pause. I'll say the formal close, that I would love it if you would visit me in social media and talk to me in the direct messages. I'm the Entrepreneur's Therapist on Instagram. And the We Can community is such an enormous source of support, both strategic and emotional. And I'll hand it over to you, Carrie, to make the formal close, and then we'll come back to some more questions.
Sure. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're tuning in on YouTube, we will close down the recording for now, but continue with some Q&A. Thanks so much.